Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Richard Stiennon. He is the Chief Research Analyst at IT Harvest. Welcome, Richard.
Hey, thanks so much, Pete.
Thanks for being here. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career?
Yeah, though never ask an industry analyst for a little of anything. But basically, first half of my career was as a automotive engineer doing crashworthiness testing on cars. But then I discovered the internet, got into the internet by starting an ISP. That led to joining the first MSSP in the United States called Netrex. Netrex went on to be acquired by ISS in Atlanta, which was then acquired by IBM. So we still have a SOC here in Southeast Michigan that is part of the managed services for IBM. But when that happened, I had already moved on. I had spent some time at PricewaterhouseCoopers as, doing essentially attack and penetration testing. We called it assessment and auditing. But I got a lot of exposure to some of the biggest companies in the United States. And then was recruited into Gartner. So for 4 years, I was a Gartner VP of research. And then I left Gartner, joined a company called Webroot Software, left them after I realized they were not going to go public, which is kind of the next thing on my dance card to do. And then I ended up starting IT Harvest because I realized that the only thing I'm really cut out to be is an industry analyst. So I started my own firm so I could do the things I like doing, which is public speaking, talking to people like you, talking to users of products and vendors, and then writing. So I got to do all that as my own analyst firm. And I've been doing that for 20 years. Took a little time out to be CMO at Fortinet. But in the meantime, IT Harvest is still here, still growing. I'm back. 3 years ago, we launched a platform that basically exposes all the data we keep on all the vendors. And that, set us off down the path of being a SaaS provider. So it's kind of back to the startup world. Still industry analysts, still provide advisory services, but now instead of subscribing to my reports or something like that, you subscribe to the database and you do your own research instead of depending on me to do it for you.
Cool. So obviously you're a research guy. So what do you think? Is the talent gap real? And could you back it up with any research?
Yeah, I've not been able to back up the numbers that are reported, right? Because some of them come from the exact same types of people that say there's a $10 trillion in loss every year, which I do know is totally wrong. It's just people just don't understand big numbers. But somebody reached out to me from a private equity company 4 years ago now. So it was right at the beginning of COVID and retained me, for months I worked with them trying to find something that would fit their thesis, which they wanted to acquire a company that could basically funnel 200 recent grads through the company as they get hands-on experience doing cybersecurity work, while simultaneously getting some sort of certification, Security Plus or something, and then would be ready to be hired by people a year later. And I presume the concept would be to charge a hefty fee for that. We couldn't find anybody. We talked to every MSSP. None of them had SOCs that employed more than 50 people. And I'm talking some of the biggest MSSPs that you know of. They just didn't need them, right? Its processes didn't require massive numbers of people. So it was not at all like the previous success this private equity company had, which was with coding people who write code. That does have departments of, at most banks have like 6,000 developers working for them. So there is a market for hiring and funneling people through. So my conclusion after all this time was that, yes, there are 2 to 3 million unfilled openings in cybersecurity. The trouble is they're evenly distributed across 6 or 7 million organizations. So, of course, if you talk to any organization, they've got a backlog of people that they need. But they're all the way from the CISO down to, a director, down to somebody under that director. They might have, if you're Bank of America, one of the largest security organizations in the world with 2,000 people, they only hire 200 people a year. And those hirings go across that full gamut. It's not entry level, grow with the company and, become a senior person. We're hiring senior people right now, and we're hiring a CISO, and we're hiring, an intern, one intern for the entire organization. So I think that's what led us to this disconnect between the number for the gap and the lack of opportunity for new graduates.
Yeah, well, and two, when you hear these millions numbers, I tend to think that maybe they're not factoring in the idea that the positions are actually funded. It's like, well, we could use more people. Right. Technically, like skill set wise, we're lacking, but do we actually have an open funded position is probably a different question.
Right. Very good point.
Yeah. Well, and what do you think we can do then? Or I guess, why do you think there's not as many junior security jobs, say, as developers?
Yeah, I think it's because you can't, our educational institutions are trying to churn out people to meet this perceived need. And they latch on to certain areas of skill sets to teach. And just like in the coding world, right? You latch on, just learn a language and learn JavaScript or whatever, or Perl or Python and get out there. It doesn't work in security because there isn't a single. If you go in and say, "Look, I could pass the CISSP exam today," which is a whole bunch of policy stuff, it has nothing to do with the actual job that a tier 1 analyst in a SOC or somebody working in desktop hygiene doing vulnerability management, they wouldn't have learned those skills. So that's why I come back to my recommendation to, if you're going to get a certification of any sort, get one from a vendor. Become expert, or at least knowledgeable in a vendor's tool. So if you were thrown into, hey, we need you to manage CyberArk today, and we've got backlog of 100 people that need their credentials okayed, you would know exactly what to do because you've done it before. It wouldn't be, what's CyberArk, right? Which is where most students come from, right? They don't know anything about the industry. That's why I wrote a book for them. There we go. I wrote this book for people new to the industry. It's Security Yearbook, history of the industry. It's got all the companies in it. That's kind of stuff you should know before you graduate. Just like, if you came out of an MBA program and you didn't know about, all the big banks or even know what hedge funds were and what they did and what, and how the manufacturing supply chain works. If you didn't have all that understanding, you'd be as ill-served as graduates today who get their certified ethical hacking, exam passed, or they've done something with system internals in a computer science class, but they just don't have anything that's employable right now. You got to meet the demand. And if you get a certification from Cisco, which has tons of classes, I know my son took Cisco's certified network engineering classes in high school, or if you got certified as a checkpoint certified security engineer, or Fortinet has training as well. Get that certification somehow. Talk your school into paying for those certifications or bringing in an instructor. It only takes like a week to get some of these. Then you put that on your resume, and when you throw your resume into a job application that asks specifically for that skill, which you can just find on LinkedIn by searching on keywords, then your resume gets kicked out to the recruiter as, hey, here's somebody who's got background in this. And they actually look at your resume and go, wow, smart person. Let's hire them.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it's almost like your best idea as a candidate. And I'm getting sort of an echo. I'm not sure what's going on, but yeah, you would think that a good idea as a candidate would be to go out and look at the job descriptions out there, and especially for the ones that you actually want as a job seeker. What are my target companies? What do their job descriptions look like? What technology stack are they using and looking for? And just kind of reverse engineer how you need to build your skills from there. It's like, I think a lot of people are getting a lot of this good advice. I guess my quandary is like, what do we do from the hiring side to justify hiring more of these people that maybe are doing everything right and do have a home lab and do have at least some basic certifications. Maybe they don't have the vendor certifications like you were saying. But, I just see, it seems like a shortage of companies or teams willing and able to train those junior folks. What's the, I guess, business case to be made there, if there is one?
I certainly think there is one, right? Because if you have long-term plans in place for your company, then you should be thinking about the future workforce and the competition for them, right? You should be wooing them early, and then hiring them early, and then supporting them through their career. And of course, you're going to be giving people their first experience, so you have to try and figure out how to retain them after they've got that year of experience under their belt or 2 years. And you have to adjust your compensation packages. And this goes way back to when I first got out of aerospace engineering school at Michigan. Took a job, and I was just really good at it, right? And everybody treated me like the young Turk, and it felt great. And yet my compensation was really, really low. And well, back then it was $25,000 a year salary, so you paid every 2 weeks, right? And that was enough to live on in 1982, and eventually get married, start a family. But after 2 years, you are worth twice that. And if you started at a big company, as you do in automotive, they don't have any policy at all that allows you to double somebody's salary. That just doesn't exist, right? The HR people say, we got these brackets, and they get 6% increase per year, and that's it. So if you got 6% increases, right, you were close to 13% increase after 2 years, and you can be recruited away for $50,000 instead of that 13% increase. And so you go, and you're going to go to a competitor, because engineering is, what is it like? It's like, I guess, like doctors, right? Once doctors get put in a niche, that's it. Can't get out of it, right? You are internal medicine, and that's what you did your internship in, and that's it. And in engineering, it's totally that way. You cannot move to a different industry. And I was in car seats. Once you're in car seats, that's it. You can't do engines. You can't do body structures. It's just the way it is. Not quite that bad in cybersecurity, right? So if you are, on staff at a large bank, there's not a lot of resistance to moving to a manufacturer or an insurance company or financial, other adjacent financial services. Might be some pushback on moving into the medical space, because the medical people are the ones that are real gatekeepers, right? We're different. We got different compliance regimes, and people's lives depend on us. And worse than the medical side of things is the operational technology people. They will not let you in the door, right? You have to be an industrial engineer and spend 10 years on the plant floor before we'll let you talk about OT security. So there's a little of that going on as well.
Yeah. Well, that's been my experience as an external recruiter. And, granted, maybe my experience is colored by the fact that I've been an external recruiter. And when a company hires me, they want to get 150% of what they're looking for versus, they want to get all the nice to haves, essentially, not just the must haves. And often it boils down to just hiring somebody from the same industry or direct competitor or, yeah, I mean, that's essentially what it boils down to. I think a lot of hiring, and I've spoken about this before, boils down to risk aversion. Companies, hiring managers don't want to take a risk on somebody. They want to hire somebody that's proven themselves at a competitor and just poach that person, essentially.
Yeah, and that's so short-sighted because hiring somebody based on their past doesn't take into account who they are and what they can do given the right environment. So maybe they were at a better company than before, so they rocked at that company, and then you hire them into your stodgy old, bureaucracy and all that, and they fail miserably, right? So there's that mismatch, not you personally, but the company, and they have to, you have to figure out that you hire for personality traits and capabilities. For instance, the ability to learn is much, much more important than any current skill sets that you can demonstrate in your resume, right? So if you came out of college and they taught you how to learn there, you'd be well suited to do anything you want anywhere in the world because you would just learn it. And there's nothing, and we are entering the era for learners, right? Because now we have all the resources at our fingertips for $20 a month. You get ChatGPT, and it will funnel the world's knowledge right into your lap, and you can use it, and it'll present it to you in a way that makes it easy for you to learn in whatever way you learn. This is kind of like the golden age for learners.
Yeah, well, and then also misinformation. It's like, if you don't know what you don't know, how do you parse between things that are true or untrue? Like, how do you verify information anymore?
Yeah, another skill set that hopefully is being taught. All the stories you hear of students turning in papers written by ChatGPT, you understand that they're not learning to check the AI's work, which is what you got to do.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up a good point, hiring somebody for essentially for their future potential and not just what they've done in the past. But yeah, often I think hiring boils down to what people have done in the past versus what they're going to be able to accomplish in the future. But certainly I think a lot of hiring comes down to hiring for personalities. The question is, how do you quantify that, or how do you hire for that without succumbing to some sort of bias? If it's such an intangible thing that you can't really put your finger on, how do you make sure that it's not a bias that you're hiring for versus traits that are,
I think, well, we already know of the shortcuts people take, right? They look at your GPA in school, and that, tells you a lot about somebody, right? It means that they're really good at taking classes and taking tests, which is adjacent to, intelligence and aptitude and all the rest. So we filter on that, right? So, and some people would say that's really biased and it certainly is, right? You are going to, in the security world, you are going to totally miss out on all the people, are on the spectrum, certainly didn't have the money to go to college and just went right to work, immediately because they're so skilled at hacking and building stuff. So I think that the better way to look at it is have a process in place for bringing people up to speed quickly. You give them a chance, you give them enough room to explore and grow, and make sure that, they're valuable contributors to the organization. And that's, goes across the board, not just in cybersecurity.
Yeah, well, I certainly think you have to give people enough room to either impress you or to do the opposite of that.
Let them make the decision for you. Make sure that you've got those guardrails in place so when somebody's not going to make it in your organization. And it feels cruel to talk about, but I know certainly in the world of sales development resources, I hate that name, but STRs and BDRs, People will hire 5 and fire 3 after the first month, right? Because it's really, really easy to tell if a person's cut out for that role, in a very, very short time frame. Not as easy if it's, I'm sure you've had this experience, right? One of your clients hires a new chief revenue officer, and the company just fails to thrive, right? Because they hire the wrong person, and there's no way to tell when you're hiring a salesperson whether they're full of it or not, right? And a lot of salespeople get to where they are because they can sell themselves. Sometimes that helps them sell the company's products, but quite often it just means that they jump from job to job. Spent a year to 18 months before the board finally goes, why are you missing your quarters? And I don't care if you got your sales force in front of you and you can explain every single thing you missed in the pipeline. We want to see results. We want you on the road. We want you closing deals.
Yeah, boy, it's interesting. I just had a similar situation happen. Had a client that hired a sales guy that I found them, and he didn't end up working out. And it boiled down to something that we couldn't possibly have screened for. He wasn't doing what he said he was going to do, basically, or he would be given an order and just wouldn't do it. It's like, how do you screen somebody for that? I don't think you can.
Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, it's really hard nowadays, but if you ask his previous employers, right, there's probably some contractual reason or liability reason where they won't tell you. They'll just confirm his or her employment dates. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't know, that's why, I tend to believe in hiring from within, right, move people up that have shown the aptitude. And you've got more experience seeing salespeople join organizations, but sales leaders are the most disruptive hire you could have, right? The sales leader comes in and fires everybody that's there and brings in their own team from the last place they were at, and tries to build something with it. And that slows you down 6 months to a year.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem to me that anytime you get attrition, voluntary or not, there's a huge disruption to morale, even outside of the individual team, but especially within said team. So it would seem to me that you would want to do everything you could to avoid hiring the wrong person in the first place. And that's where that risk aversion comes in, I guess.
That's right. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on how do you avoid some red flags, or what would you look for in the hiring process to make sure that you're not making a bad hire?
I'm not going to say I'm an expert at it. Once you've established the filter, right? The person's got the right experience. They had the same role or were just under the same role at their last organization. They can claim successes in that role. So, so that's kind of the table stakes, right? And then it's a matter of, there's chemistry, right? There's nothing wrong with making decisions based on a gut feel when you're talking about personalities, right? It's how you find your soulmate in life, right? It's like, you don't run them through a battery of tests, right? You go, this is the one. Or you grow to understand this is the one. It might not hit you like a bolt of lightning. So, how do you do that? I mean, you're going to spend more time with some of these people than you do spend with your spouse. So kind of ask yourself those questions. Will I work side by side with this person, whatever, late into the evening or grueling road trips, etc. Will this work with that person, on your team?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then, get other people's input, right? You can make a choice, as I did recently, that felt right to me, but didn't work with the rest of my team. And, so I guess get them involved, and at least talking to the person. And then hopefully you've got an environment where they will tell you, no, this person's real shady, right? I didn't like the way he, so definitely get, if you're hiring a man, make sure that a woman interviews him and meets him, right? So you can avoid any future, just bad, if he causes bad vibes, then you got a problem because you're going to have a problem with your customers as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, especially customer-facing roles. I think the personality matters even more probably than, say like an analytics role. But yeah, obviously personality is going to matter because ultimately you're going to be working with other people no matter what in whatever role that you're in. But yeah, that's a great point to have a variety of people talk to somebody. I think especially too, like different levels in the hierarchy of an organization. A lot of my clients over the years have had a C-suite executive talk to the people in the hiring process that are on the candidate side. And that's a real wow factor for the candidates. They enjoy it and they get a firsthand experience of what that executive has planned for the company.
Yep. Yeah, I think I think for a small company, the CEO should talk to everybody, right? All the way up to 1,000 employees. The CEO should have talked to everybody. They're not going to have the ability to, write out a review for every one of those. But I think that's the case. And then, once you're over 1,000, then the VP should talk to everybody as well. You're getting, as soon as you're at that size, the leadership starts creating fiefdoms and they start kind of war, or put it nicely, they're fighting for resources, right? They have to compete for resources, engineering versus sales versus product, etc.
Yeah.
So you want to, try and curtail that as much as possible. Also allow people to move within the organization and encourage that to happen, because there's nothing better than for a product person moving into sales as a sales engineer or something, and vice versa, because now those two typically warring factions have better understanding of each other.
Yeah, well, and you gain skill sets in one function that you can bring to that other function. Yep. I'm a huge believer in hiring for transferable skills versus hiring that exact, again, has done it yesterday type of experience.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're looking for a job today, and they're going to be looking for one tomorrow if they aren't motivated and learning the new things.
Well, yeah, it's highly self-motivated people that have options and are bright. They want to be challenged. They don't want to do the same thing that they were doing yesterday and for the last 5 years. I mean, I've always kind of been that way, where I crave novelty and stimulation and creativity and that sort of thing. Not everybody's built that way, but especially high achievers, I think, often have that desire for more. And if you're only hiring people into the exact same job as they were doing yesterday, or at a different company, at a direct competitor, they're not going to be compelled to go anywhere, really.
That's right. Yeah, and it's I've, like you, I've always been surprised. Like I'll be at a company and I'll just start hearing everybody dissatisfied with whatever, and it's all we talk about is how the company sucks, and it felt like everybody was going to leave. So I leave. Nobody else ever left in some of these situations. And looking back on it, I realized, well, they were right? They stayed at that seat manufacturer all the way up to retirement, and I'm 66 years old and still grinding away. So, but I'm not bored.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, and then the opposite can happen too. And I've been on the other side of this. I call it the attrition avalanche, where one person will leave and then that snowballs, and then all of a sudden the whole team is gone. And then that company is in a really bad place because they just had an entire team leave almost out of nowhere.
Yeah. Imagine what it's like at OpenAI, where people are leaving for $100 million salaries, just in bonuses, which is ridiculous. Imagine what it takes to stay behind and not go, I should get that.
Yeah, well, I've learned as a recruiter, if I can start one of those avalanches, I have a way of basically acquiring some of the best talent out there all at once for one of my clients.
Yeah.
And what that requires is understanding what the pain points of those people are and what their motivators for moving on might be. And I spend more of my time on my screening calls talking about motivators than basically anything else, even the actual skills, because once you've been doing it long enough, you can quickly assess if somebody has the skills. It's more about personality and communication skills and those motivators, which I believe lead to longer term career matches. I think a lot of recruiting focuses on what skills do they have, and can they do the same job essentially tomorrow in their new role without any ramp up time. But that's not looking at the future, and if somebody's going to stick around for a long time. And like you said about salespeople, that seems to be increasingly common for people to move on every 6 months or a year. If they get the first win or the slight inkling that they're not satisfied, they're just going to leave because they don't have any loyalty to the employer. But, to some degree, I don't really blame people, because I don't think companies have the same loyalty to the employees that they used to have.
No, they don't. Man, when I was first out of school, I ran into people at General Motors, and I had never thought I'd work in automotive. I thought I was going to aerospace, but in 1982, there wasn't any aerospace. So when I ended up working for a supplier to GM and Ford, Chrysler, I'd meet the GM engineers and see their hiring practices. They were identifying future engineering employees when they're in high school and labeling them high potential candidates, I guess. And they would ease their way, give them scholarships. They could get into good schools. They created a school called GM Tech in Flint, and they get, recruit them into there. They're usually children of GM employees. And I'm sure, because all GM employees or management employees were white, I'm sure there weren't any people of color getting put through this process. But they had long-term plans for succession and, getting people into the company. And a lot of those just kept going, right? They're like already blessed, right? The company already said, these are the ones, so you're going to go to the top. Not quite sure. I think all of that is fair or sufficient. But the very fact that GM would think that far ahead and have a university just to train people, I felt like when I got my first job as a welder, the welding or the shipbuilding company put me through training, and it's like their own little class. It was also a trial, right? If I couldn't learn, they didn't want us. So that was, and I think we've lost all that, right? We want to just hire and put them in there and don't owe them anything. They gave us a week's worth of work. We give them a week's worth of salary. We're good. I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, all those business relationships seem to be becoming more transactional for sure, and more short-term focused versus long-term focused. And we had kind of talked about this previous to our recording today, but what do you think is causing this short-term focus in terms of hiring versus building longer-term pipelines?
Well, I know in my world it's because I'm in the technology space. Technology is moving so fast, right? It's the company that's growing really fast and doing really well is going to either IPO or get acquired. So they're driving towards a goal that doesn't necessarily take into account the livelihood or work-life balance of all the employees that they hire. They might make radical decisions that, hey, if you look at it, we have this huge item on our balance sheet, which is our liabilities for the leases that we signed. We signed long-term leases in these buildings, and nobody's using the building, therefore it's a waste. So everybody go back to the office, without taking into account the fact that people made decisions in the meantime of where they wanted to live, and they all of a sudden, they used to have an hour commute. And they decided to move it into the country, and now they got a 2-hour commute when you demand that they come back. And it's that sort of short-sightedness that fast-moving, fast-paced technology creates. Probably less so at, if you're at a bank or a bank branch manager, right? You're going to have less of that drive to change everything all the time like we do in technology.
Yeah, well, and then I think looking at quarterly earnings and stuff like that relates to quarter-based decisions
right.
Versus the longer term. But yeah, I think in an ideal world, you would plan 5-10 years out and know that you're developing a pipeline that will go on to make the company profitable for years to come. Yep. Especially with the junior talent that costs less. It's like, yeah, you have to invest on the front end time and resources to build a training program or an internship program or campus recruiting program, which I did. But I mean, it's not as hard as you might think, really, if you make it a priority.
Yeah. I mean, I track 4,000 cybersecurity vendors, and the primary data I look at is their headcount growth, right? Because that's, it's a proxy for revenue growth, and it's certainly a proxy for measuring how much capital they're putting to work, right? So if they take big funding, of course, their headcount growth is up and to the right. But also recently, there have been many companies that haven't taken any more funding since 2022. If they're still growing, they got over the hump and they can add a person and add to their revenue. And so they're just doing what they should. If they're flat, then, maybe they're driving towards profitability. So they're not hiring just yet. And, but if the measurement of growth is headcount, and all organizations in our system want to grow, then, they should have these plans in place to take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if growth is the goal, I think a lot of security teams right now on the internal side, where security is not a revenue generating function, they're kind of in the opposite mode, where it's either contracting in size their teams or just steady state, trying to keep things operating as leanly as possible.
Just tell the CFO that it's the same thing as the finance function, right? Finance function does nothing to add to the bottom line, right? They're just a cost center. So hit them with that when they start saying that security is a cost center.
Yeah, well, I don't know what's the way around that perception, I guess.
It's on the sales side, it's constant battle for people to convince people that if you buy our product, then there's less likelihood of you having a breach. And that's why the finance guys go, well, what's the likelihood? We're just going to buy insurance instead of your product. And I think the answer is education. So don't go to the board and speak the board's language or the CFO's language, which CISOs are coached to do all the time, right? We've been saying that for 25 years. It hasn't worked. So maybe we should stop trying to do it, because as soon as you sit down at that board meeting and everybody starts talking about the internal rate of return and all the rest of the gobbledygook to our ears about how businesses are run, if we start using that language, first of all, we're going to feel very uncomfortable saying things like that because they sound nonsensical. But it immediately means, okay, the CFO's in charge here, right? But if you go in and you start talking about, some of the latest ransomware techniques and how the organization behind them is morphing, and, how all their, close competitors or friends are getting hit by ransomware, and then just keep hammering home on the technical, scary aspects of what we do, they'll respect you. And they'll feel the same sense of urgency that you do to actually protect the organization.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, generally I hear the opposite viewpoint, just like you were saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, and a lot of people too will, the talking heads on LinkedIn will say, well, don't use fear, uncertainty, and doubt in your marketing. And, some people might say that to CISOs as well, like that doesn't work, scaring people. But it does work.
It does work. What are the motivators? You were talking about motivation before. You've got greed, which is, hey, more money. That's very motivating. And you've got fear that, oh my God, you might not be able to have a job tomorrow because your company's gone, because these guys just wiped all your disks for you.
Yeah, well, and fear of missing out too, to your point about your competitors are doing this.
That's right.
I'm discovering that in my own business development efforts as a business owner. Like, if you're able to name drop a few companies or say, I've worked with a few of your competitors, that's a pretty powerful, I guess it's social proof is what it is, essentially.
Yeah, it eases, that I've been thinking a lot lately about the sale of analysts, or how industry analysts fit in the sales cycle of things, right? And it's quite, the way a Gartner or Forrester succeeds and what they actually offer is kind of, I've got I'm giving you permission to make the decision you're going to make anyways, right? So then you can say, oh, Gartner said these guys are okay to buy. And it's amazing how much, especially inside large organizations, that is needed, right? So if you're trying to sell into an organization and you don't have the ability to say, look at it, I sold into your direct competitor and they're actually bigger than you, so therefore it's okay to buy from me. If you don't have that, then it's just like going up against a wall.
Yeah. Well, and so much in security is about trust, and what's a good way to generate trust very quickly? It's through social proof, essentially.
Yeah,
I mean, I see that as a recruiter who, our profession doesn't have necessarily the best reputation. So you have to quickly show that you're not just like all the others. And the best way to do that is through having some sort of referral or some sort of social proof.
Yep.
So, well, we're actually coming up on time, believe it or not. So just one last question for you. Is there anything we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
Yeah, I guess. Oh, well, yes. The impact of AI. And I don't believe that the layoffs occurring in the tech area are, even though they're attributed to AI, this is not my first rodeo, right? It's the management, when they do a layoff, needs something to tell Wall Street that makes them, that sounds good, right? And tell the employees too. But they will always latch on to the latest thing to say that's the reason they're laying people off. When in actuality, they're just doing what, GE did for decades. They're picking the bottom 10% of performers and getting rid of them, and they will replace them, over time. And that's just the cruel way that large organizations have figured out how to optimize their workforce. So that's all that's going on. That said, if you are looking for a job in security, you've got to be totally aware that all the tier 1 jobs in SOCs are going to be gone. So that, even though it was hard to get those jobs and there weren't very many of them, all those are going to be gone. And in very, very short order. I think in the next 18 months, there won't be any more. It'll be cheaper just to deploy an agent to do the same triage on alerts. And that's going to impact a whole bunch of the other functions inside our space, right? Vulnerability management, pen testing, a lot of GRC functions, all those going to go away. So skill up on using AI. You want to, and you can use AI agents yourself. Build a few, put them to work finding you a job, sorting through LinkedIn ads. Same with, a recruiter such as yourself, use AI to make those matches and find the arguments why a person with this background is a perfect fit for this organization.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, upskilling is everything these days, even more so than maybe the last 10, 20 years, just easily. Because humans didn't have as much competition,
right?
I guess, until recently. Well, great point. If people want to reach out to you or keep up with the work that you do, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, I've got a Substack. It's stiennon.substack.com, and that's where I post everything I'm working on. And certainly connect me on LinkedIn. I'm always open. Unless you put Web3 as an identifier in your profile. Because if you say that, not connected.
Fair enough. Well, we'll put links to everything in the description too. So thanks for your time, Richard.
Cool. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, everybody. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.